Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Olson. I'm a senior technical sales representative with Alpha Technologies Enersys. And so today we're going to do the FXM to FXM HP comparison. And so I'll be talking about that, and then other webinars also coming up with another one tomorrow. So anyway, thanks for coming to this webinar today. So let's talk about the FXM HP. Apparently remote's not working. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay, so the FXM HP is the latest product that came out. We released this in November, and it's built off of the same drivetrain as the previous model, but we have beefed things up a little bit. So added to the power supplies, had to rearrange a little bit. You'll notice the biggest change is the center section there with the display, communication, all kinds of differences that I will be covering today. So some people ask, why HP versus the FXM? Well, hopefully you'll get that answer today in spades. There's a lot to it. So let's get into it. So with the FXM series, we're used to the two-line display, right? We've had this thing for a long time. It's a good unit, but we've had requests for a lot more enhancements from our users. What can you do to make this thing better? You know, hey, we'd like these features, on and on and on, and I'll go through those today that show why the HP is really a superior product. So here we go. So the biggest thing everybody notices is the display, right? I mean, you go from a two-line LCD to a 4.3-inch color, high res, really catches your eye. But not only that, it's also a touch screen, which makes it really easy to navigate. So you're out in the field, you can use your finger, you can use a stylus if you want, and navigate your way throughout the system. Okay. Display has all kinds of information on there for you. So I'll cover that for you. So we've got the maintenance section. So that's like utility things like battery test, testing your relays if you wanted to. Information section is going to give you a part number for the unit, our tech support number, firmware levels, and things like that. Menu system farther over. That's laid out a lot like our internet web page. So I'll show you that coming up. And once you learn one navigation, you've learned them both. So that makes it easy. Farther over is the shortcuts icon. We've got two different sections of shortcuts. These are utility shortcuts. So Ethernet settings, time, date, language, those type of things would be there. And then the last one over is the login. For this system, you can look at things through the LCD, but you can't make any changes unless you are logged into the system. Okay, over here is the alarm section. So it's going to show the highest level alarm. So whichever one happens to be, we've got 4 levels of alarms, which I'll be talking about. The highest one is going to show, and you just simply touch it, and then you'll get to see all of the alarms present. Section I like the most, I mean, it's all good, but the dashboard area here is incredibly powerful. You notice it's got 6 fields there, and they will show values as far as input and output. They're going to show you configuration settings. And not only is there 6 of them, we actually have 4 pages of information. So if I touch this button here on the screen, it will actually then change the display to the other pages, right? And so you then have 4 pages that you can then decide what you want to do. And that really is key here. You get to decide what each of those values shows up. So 24 fields that are user configurable. And if you don't like how we've got it set up, you get to change it. So incredibly powerful that way. All right, next one, you might need your sunglasses on, so get ready for that. There we go. So when I first got this as my demo unit to play with and to give feedback to the company on this, I was like, yeah, but how does this thing do in the outside? How does it do in bright sun? Because, you know, I've been outside, you've been out in the field, you look at the LCD displays, and even some of the best laptops that are designed to be read outside can be a challenge. And so I really wanted to know what this thing looked like. So I took it outside, pointed it right at the sun, you know, direct full on the sun. There's no shielding over the unit. I just took my cell phone camera and took this picture. Didn't do any editing tricks or anything. So this is really what it looks like. And as you can see, it's incredibly easy to read. So even in full sun, I think that's a huge bonus. You're going to be able to see what this thing is saying without having to shelter or shade it or anything like that. So, all right. So I mentioned the shortcuts. So we've got a couple different sections of them. So touching the dashboard area takes you to this larger group of shortcuts. And in the shortcuts, you're going to find things like status information, the ability to configure things, So another way to get to items in the menu without having to navigate the menu system. The menu system is pretty logical and easy to figure out, but we put some of the most likely items that you'd want to go to into the shortcut screen, which makes it easier for you. The utility gear icon, that takes you to the second group here, okay? So let's say, for example, we wanted to set our Ethernet setting. We'd simply touch that, and then this next window pops up. Go into here on the Ethernet port, and it takes you through Wizard, and now you can quickly then go in and configure it. Didn't have to navigate the menu system. It just jumps you past some things and gets you right there. Programmability. This is a big difference between the FXM and the FXM-HP. The FXM, you could do a fair amount of programming through the LCD, but you couldn't do everything. There were definitely some limitations. You couldn't set the direct contact relays and some other things through there. But that's not the case with the FXM-HP. You can do everything. So if you can configure it on the web page, you can configure it in the LCD. Now, not everything is visible, which we'll be talking about coming up later because of the pure graphics of it, but programmability, you're set to go. And you can see, for an example here, we've got the battery string configuration on the web page, and here it is again on the LCD. And to make that easy, we've got some of these things set up in wizards. So like changing the network configuration, changing the battery setting, just to walk you through some of the ways to make sure that you can get all your information in there and make sure it's right. You don't have to worry about it. We just step you through that process. Okay. Another thing is cloning. Well, maybe not that kind of cloning, maybe not sheep, but how about cloning the configuration? So this was something that our customers asked for repeatedly. One of the most common requests I had with the FXM series is, hey, got my configuration set. I got a bunch of systems. Can I clone it? Boy, I wish you could. But by the way, you can now in the FXM-HP. So get your configuration set the way you want. Set those values for the dashboard the way that you want. Get your direct contact relays program. Get it all set up. And now you can clone that system without having to rekey in or reformat another unit. So just simply use the Ethernet port locally or remotely, or use a USB flash drive. And you can now take that configuration and clone it over to all your systems. And it's really quick and easy, just takes seconds. All right, sheep, back to the barn. Updating. So with the FXM series, you could go through the Ethernet port or the RS-232 to do your updates. A little bit different here with this system. Now you can do Ethernet, but now you can also do USB. So you can do flash drive or Ethernet for updates. Ethernet, of course, would be locally or remote. But now that we've got the controller, so think of the system a little bit differently than what you're used to with the FXM series. You know, you thought of the FXM as just the UPS. But what we added to the HP is the controller. So that center section really is the brains of the unit, okay? So think of that kind of as a separate device, even though it's integrated, and then the rest is the FXM UPS. So that controller has an operating system which runs it, and then it's also got software on top of that. So two software levels for that. Then you've got the FXM, which has its firmware, which then controls all the other things. So the three softwares together then make the system run, and those are easy to update as well. All right, take that off to the next screen. We need that later. So here we go. What about driving the system? So I talked about using your finger. You can do that. You can use a stylus, but you can also use a keyboard and mouse if you wanted to. I've done this in some of my demonstrations. It works pretty well. So you just plug into the USB drive up there, socket, I should say, and off you go. And I've even done it with a transceiver, so you can hook up a keyboard, wireless, and mouse at the same time. Use both if you want, and you can run it. So I don't know how many people will do it, but it's a feature that's there and it works. So why not? Another type of communication we have with the FXM-HP that the FXM did not have is a CAN bus. And CAN bus means controller area network. This is something we have not seen typically in the traffic market, but used in a lot of other markets out there. So it's good for communication between devices. All right. So with the CAN port on the FXM-HP, we can hook up to things like an analog to digital input-output interface, and we can monitor voltages, DC currents, temperature. We can have more digital inputs. We can drive more direct contact relays. So those are some of the basic things you could do with those modules. Another thing you can do is that you could actually add rectifiers to it. So if you have a situation where you've got a bunch of large battery banks, you can add to the charging capability of the FXM HP just by simply plugging in rectifiers that are controlled by the HP. So that's something that we've done before, and we're looking at again as we get into this more. So lots of opportunities with CAN bus. Security. So this was a big thing. We've been asked this for many years. You know, the FXM, you know, had the 4-digit super secret password with a backdoor, and so not the most secure. So we needed to get away from that, right? And a lot of people are asking, hey, what can you do to beef up your security? So we did. We've got enhanced 256-bit encryption, right? And no backdoor. So if you forget it, you're going to have to ship it out your backdoor to our backdoor, and then we can reset the system. So, but yeah, no backdoor into the system. You can also have central server authentication like Radius can be used also. Some users are using that. SNMP has the opportunity to go not only version 1, 2, but also now 3. So we're up to version 3 as an option, and it's also SSL ready. Okay, so that's just part of the security. We also have increased the security for access and change that, right? So you've got an admin level, and if you're admin, you can get into everything, of course. But we also then have an account manager who can set, you know, the different levels as far as the access of the different users. And there's 2 types of users. There's an operator, and an operator can go in and make changes, change the settings of something, update the software, the firmware, do those type of things. And then we also have a guest access where guests can simply view things. So on the LCD, you can view it. So if you open that lock door to get to the unit, you can, of course, view it, but you can't change any setting. With the web page, if you have the IP address, you can't see anything. All you get is a login screen until you log in. So you're really locked out that way. So security is a big difference now. All right, what about logging? So the FXM had a great log. Use logging a lot when I talk to customers. You know, if they're seeing something, they want to look at their power or the UPS operation. The event log is a great way to do that. And the FXM had a decent one. It was 200 lines long. You could export it. You could see the date and timestamp of the events and what the events were. And then if any alarms or faults were present, you would have the LED there, and you could hover over it to see what it was. And if you exported it, you could take it into Excel. You can see what was going on. So that was great. But the HP is really the next step above that. There is, or many steps above that. There's so much logging going on. So I'll show you what some of those are. So we've got events and alerts. And so let's talk about what those are. With the FXM, you're thinking of alarms and faults, right? That's what you normally would see if you had any issues in the system, any types of notifications. There are no faults in the FXM HP. There's just different levels of alarms, okay, which are also called alerts. So right here, we're looking at the events page. So events are things like UPS mode, battery mode. It's going to record the outages there, any changes that are made to the system, software, firmware. That's all going to get tracked in this log called the events log. Now, what's a big change too is that you'll notice right next to me there on my shoulder, total rows, it's got 300. You can see 300 events on the LCD, or I'm sorry, the web page, 25 on the LCD. But if you export that up here, you can now have 3,000 events that have been logged, first in, first out. So a lot of history is being stored. You can also search any events. So if you want to look, you don't know where it is, you want to see how many times something has occurred, do a search for it. And then it's going to bring up all of those. Navigation on the bottom, we've got numbers. So you can go through and you can click down to the pages if you want. And then you can also sort using these arrows to sort the category. So a lot of ways to navigate that. Then the alerts page, the alarms looks like this. It's going to put the most recent one up at the top. Again, 3,000 of them it will hold. And it's going to show you any alarm that you've ever had, first in, first out, till it's gone. So a lot of power there, a lot more than we had with the FXM. We've added a battery log, right? Which is, I think, is really helpful because you can see when your battery's been charged, when it's been discharged, how much power it delivered during a certain outage. Over here, you can see that amp hours delivered. And then there's many, many more off to the right that aren't being shown on the screen capture, that if you export it to CSV file, you're going to see probably another, 8-10 more fields of information about your battery. So very helpful to see what's been going on there. Power outage. We had this on some of the recent firmwares of the FXM, where you could click power outage and it would bring up the 5 most recent outages that the system had. That was nice. It would go out to the event log, grab that and pull it back, take a few seconds to do so, and then you'd have it. But now we have a dedicated power outage log. So every power outage that has happened is going to get logged here into the system. And with the old system, you would have to look at it and say, okay, when did I go to inverter mode? When did line come back? You'd highlight it and then you'd have to figure it out. Okay, how much time was that, right? Sometimes hard to calculate that as you cross minutes or you cross hours or whatever. But we've made that easy for you here. We've already done the calculation, right? And we've told you the start time and the end time if you wanted it. So a lot simpler. And of course, 3,000 of them, and you can export it. Data log. This is a lot of power. So just think of the FXM HP as a UPS, but also it's a power monitoring device. Now, it's not a power analyzer, because power analyzers are different, that they're set up to capture all kinds of things like transients and distortions, and they capture very, very fast, right? In the millisecond range or faster. This isn't quite like that, but it really is a good, decent power monitor to show you what's been going on. And one of the features that does this is data log. So this is something that I've set up, and each user can set this up. And what you get is you can set up to 10 data logs, and each data log can have up to 20 data signals. So for example, on this one, I've set it up with 5 things to monitor. I've got AC input voltage, output voltage, battery voltage, AC output current, and battery current. And I'm tracking those. And you can see on the graph by looking to see what's been going on. So for instance, the AC input voltage is the gold. And you can see it dropped down. I killed the utility going into it. And then over here, it popped back up. And then we can look at what happened to the AC output voltage. That's in blue. Well, it popped up because the inverter turned on and regulated at 20 volts, and then it went off again. So with the data log, we can see what's been happening. Now, I said before, a power analyzer, a dedicated one, will capture very fast. This captures every 2 seconds would be the fastest. So it's going to capture a lot of events, but it's not going to capture everything. But 2-second sample is pretty good when you start looking at snapshots in time and the information that you can get. Right, some things that you can log, you get to decide what it's going to log, you decide how often it samples. So if you don't want it to go every 2 seconds, you could set it to whatever you want. Maybe you want it once a minute, whatever. You get to decide what triggers a data log. So are you manually starting it, or are you going to have it monitor some situation or an equation that you've written as to what's going on with your power and then trigger the data log? So say, for example, maybe you want it to record anytime it's not in line mode. It's very easy to write an equation to do that. And I'll show you that coming up in a future webinar, how to write this equation so you can make the data log kick on anytime it's not in line mode and capture information for you. So just tons of power. All right, then of course you can export it to CSV like everything else. But what if you don't want to go to that trouble? You don't want to take the time to set up the data log. I mean, it's not hard, but what if you didn't want to do it? What if you wanted the system to be hooked up and just run and walk away and still get some of that kind of information? Well, you can. We've got the performance logs, which are pre-configured logs, all set to go in the unit. You simply just hook it up and it starts recording this information and sampling information every 2 seconds. So it's going to monitor things like AC output voltage, input voltage, output current, output power, battery voltage, battery current, and more. There's a longer list. And it's going to capture that information automatically for you. And so what it's going to do, it's going to sample every 2 seconds, get that information. So it starts over here in the seconds category. Okay. And you can see all its different samples. And if I hovered over it with my mouse on a live display, it would actually show me then the value as to that particular point I happen to be hovering on. And we can see, what's been happening with the AC input voltage. Okay. Then it's seconds, of course, turn into minutes, right? So now it's going to, on the minute side, you can notice we've got 3 lines there. It's going to show you the minimum, the maximum, and the average for each minute. So for each capture, right? So taking those 30 captures and getting those values for you. Then minutes rolls into hours, and hours roll into days. And then you can export the log out of the days section. So you would get a min for each day, a max for each day, and an average for each day. So, and it'll hold a year's worth or 365 days worth of information. So without having to do anything, you've already got this information. Nothing like this in the legacy product FXM, right? It's nothing like this. In fact, there's nothing like this out on the market for UPS. So very powerful, all kinds of monitoring. All right, and export it, of course. Power flow. I'm individuals, if you haven't noticed, I like to be able to see a system. So a customer calls me on the phone and, they start giving me information, maybe there's something not quite right in the field, or they're describing a setup that they want to do and you want to see what's going on, right? Or they've set it up and they want to know how much runtime they've got. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you could actually see like input and output values instead of writing them all down and then trying to draw this mental map in your head, right? Well, the FXM-HP does this for you, and it's called Power Flow, and it's the ability to see live what's occurring in the field. So I've got an FXM-HP hooked up to a set of little 5 amp hour batteries. I've got a little light bulb on there as a load, and I've got a Variac at its input where I can actually control the voltage. So let's take a look at Power Flow and see what that looks like. So here we are. I've got the IP address plugged into my web browser. No software required with the FXM-HP, just like the FXM. Just type in your IP address. As long as you're on the right IP scheme, you're good to go. Okay, and we can see what's going on with the power. AC power coming in. We've got about 120 volts coming in. Here's the FXM-HP, and we're currently in line mode. Shows me my 6 dry contact relays and my 3 user inputs. And if I hover over any of those relays, it's going to show me what it's currently configured for. Okay. Output shows me the voltage and then my load, 12 VA little LED light on there. Shows me we've got current also going to the batteries, and it thinks I've got a larger battery string than I've got. But so it's calculating and saying, yeah, you can run that for about a day or so based on that load. So runtime remain calculation right here on Power Flow. So let's make it do something different. So I'm going to turn off power to the unit, and then we'll see AC will disappear. There we go. And now we're drawing power off of the batteries. Okay, and then powering the intersection that way. The mode changed. We're in inverter mode. Dry contact relays went blue. They do that when they're energized, so you can visually see what's going on. So C1 and C5 are currently energized. It's also telling me I got 2 alarms, so let's click that. And I can scroll down and see what's happening with my alarms. So on battery, AC power outage, and then it also gives me some statistics up here as to what's going on. All right, I got more relays kicking in as well as it runs and provides power, okay? So Power Flow, great way to visually see what's going on. Wouldn't it be great to look at this remotely? I think that'd be incredibly powerful. All right, so let's turn the inverter off then, let it get back to line mode. All right, and then I'll turn my Variac up and you can see it even adjust more. So at the input then, I've got 145 volts coming in, and you can see it's in buck 1. So it's using the transformer then to regulate that voltage, to push it down into a safe range. Intersection will only be seeing 126.5 volts. So just a quick demo on how buck boost works. Well, as long as we're on the web page, I'll give you a quick tour of this. We'll do more in depth at previous webinars. But this is what the new web page looks like. So the FXM series had a good web page, nice tree navigation on the left side. You could see all kinds of things, make all kinds of choices for setting your parameters and the operation, how you want it to work. This is a little bit different. This is far better even than that. So on the left side, we've got the alarm section, okay, just like we had on the LCD. So, and the highest level alarm would show there, okay. Here's the dashboard area like we had on the LCD, but a little bit different. Due to space then, we were able to put 8 fields up at a time instead of just 6. And so we've done that. So here there's 3 pages, and I can just click here to navigate through the different pages, and they're same values that you have through the LCD. Okay, so it just mirrors each other, just laid out a little bit differently. My favorite feature, probably as far as navigation, is the search all. You can type in keywords and it will very quickly take you to things. It's basically a web page shortcut. So it gets you right there. And I probably navigate with that 75% of the time instead of using the menu system. The menu system's good, but I know the keywords, and so it makes it a lot easier. Okay. And speaking of that, next week's webinar is the quick configuration guide, in which I'll be going over how to set up the common items that you probably want to be doing, both web page and LCD, and you'll learn those shortcuts. So, all right, what else? So here's the menu system. So dashboard, showing us information on the controller, also information on the FXM-HP. It's kind of like a status screen. More detailed status is off to the right. Here's controller. So remember the brains of the unit. So in here, we can configure things like communication setup. So Ethernet, email, SNMP, all of that would be in there. And then we got a bunch of advanced functions like custom data, which I'll talk about in a minute, user alarms, tons of stuff. Here's the actual FXM. So now I can get into status information. I can see what's going on with my AC input voltage, my output voltage, my battery, my inputs, and then my direct contact relays. Okay. So a lot of windows that you can see all types of information. Here's our alarms. And then here's all those logs I was talking about. So laid out really intuitive, I think, really easy. Once you learn the one menu system, like I said, you can do the same thing on the LCD and it's easy to run. All right. Okay, let's get back to the rest of the presentation. So talking about alarms, there's over 60 alarms in the FXM-HP. So where the FXM series, we had a bunch of alarms and faults, but you had no control over them. You could control which one, whether they showed up in the log or not, or generate an email. But as far as changing any of them, you couldn't touch it. There was nothing you could do, which is unfortunate because many times customers say, hey, I'd sure like to turn this off or change that setting, and you couldn't. But with the FXM-HP, you've got a lot of control. And besides that, not only can you configure the alarms, but you can also create your own. So let's take a look at the alarms. So here we are looking at the all alarms page. Okay, and again, just like the other pages that you've seen, you've got the navigation, search, right, pages down below, and sorting. Okay, so let's take a look at this one here, AC input breaker open. All right, and so when I say all alarms, this is controller, FXM, and battery. So it's all in the same list here. And pretty much the first 3.5 pages of what we're looking at have to do with the controller. Then the rest, for the most part, are about the FXM. So we're going to take a look at the AC input breaker open. So it shows us that it's currently inactive. It shows us its warning, its priority level is a warning, and there's no relay assigned. I could actually test the alarm by clicking here just to show that, hey, yep, this alarm is working. But to get more information, I need to click this arrow over here, and it's going to allow us to drill in. So let's do that. Okay, so now we're at the individual alarm level. So we're looking at the AC input breaker open. Okay, and we can see over here that it is enabled. So now you can actually disable an alarm. If you got an alarm going off and you don't care about it, you can disable it, or you can change its priority level. That's right here. So there's 4 levels: warning, minor, major, and critical. Warning level means it's just going to stay local to the system. Minor, major, and critical will generate emails. Okay, so if you want to reduce the level of something, just kick it to a warning. That way you'll still get notified of it, but you're not going to get the email. It'll show up in your logs. Okay. Another big change on configuration is relay. You can configure any alarm to drive a relay. Now, the way the unit comes by default is that C5 is programmed for alarms, and it's going to be programmed for the minor, major, and critical level alarms. So if you get any alarms in those categories, it's going to trigger that direct contact relay. But if you wanted something specific called out, you could do that by clearing any other triggers for that relay and just saying, hey, based on this alarm, I want you then to be driven. Okay, really powerful when you add in equations, which we'll be talking about soon. So then we have user alarms, right? So there's the 60 that we've got set up from the factory, 60 plus, but now you can actually add your own alarms, which I think are really powerful. So we've got 2 types. there's the threshold alarm. So it's monitoring some parameter, right? Some value. And if the value gets above that or below that, based on how you've got it programmed, it's going to generate an alarm. Okay. And you can do things like buck and boost or inverter counts, or amount of time and backup or something like that, or AC input voltage, or battery voltage. I mean, there's a long list of things that you can pick. I'll be going more over in that detail on other webinars coming up to actually show you how to program that. So, but to think of the power of that though. So say, for example, you've got an intersection that is, possibly showing you more outages than you think is normal, right? Maybe you've got loose connections in the field and you really want to keep track of that. So you go out there and you reset the counter, you log it, right? And hopefully you're doing that every year with your PMs anyway. That gives you the maximum value on that. But now you set an alarm. You say, okay, if I get over, 200 inverter events, 300 inverter events, whatever number you pick, generate an alarm. Okay. You can program it to do that. And then it's going to tell you, hey, alarm went off. I've just exceeded that. So just a lot of ways that you can keep track of what's going on in the field. The other alarm is the digital alarm. So this is where instead of monitoring a parameter of value of something like voltage or something like that, now it's monitoring conditions like has a timer reached its limit, or a counter hit the count that you set, or more powerful yet, has an equation been satisfied, one that you wrote in custom data. Let's talk about that. This is one of Jack Tolbert's favorite features is custom data. Our regional sales manager, Jack, he saw this and he was like, oh my gosh, the power in here is amazing. And it really is. You really are in control of the UPS as far as monitoring things, triggering different things. You have the ability to do so. So let me show you some examples of that. So here we are looking at some custom data setups. So I'm going to move over to the other side. Oh, there we go. Hit the wrong button. There we go. All right. So if we look over here at the variables, these are the things you're going to monitor. So you set them up, and they can be either a numeric variable where you're watching a value, okay, or they can be a state value. Is something true or is it false? A condition, right? Am I in inverter mode? Am I not in inverter mode? So we can monitor those things. So for this one that I've written right here, I'm monitoring 4 different variables, and I'm going to see whether they satisfy the condition, okay? So for example, low battery relay and time of day. A lot of our users will set up their system to take their intersection to flash when the batteries hit 40% or some amount like that, right? Some people use timer, but a lot will use low battery, okay? But what if you didn't want it to go to flash if you happen to be during rush hour? Maybe you've got an intersection, say at the top of an exit ramp on a freeway, and you're afraid due to the volume, you could be backing up onto the freeway with traffic, right? Kind of unsafe condition. Of course, you got to do your own engineering, decide how you want the stuff to run. But that could possibly be a condition where you say, you know what, if it's during rush hour, don't go to flash, but any other time, yes, go to flash. And you handle that with an equation. So we monitor the 4 variables over here, and then we write a simple equation. And it simply says, if morning rush equals false, which means we're not in the morning rush hour, so I set up 2 time periods, and I'm not in the evening rush hour, and the inverter happens to be on, and I happen to be in a low battery condition, 40% or less, then you can take the intersection to flash. But if any of those are not that, then you can't, right? So we just write that equation. They're not tough to do. I'll be doing a webinar just on custom data coming up, where I go through and I teach you how to write the equations for this one and then another one as well. So a lot of power there. So you can monitor all types of things, the AC input and output, battery, counters, timers, and a lot more. And then you can write the equation. So time of day, low battery, no line is the one I just talked about. Another one is time of day flash. So let's say you've got an intersection that's maybe out in the distance of the city, but it's got a lot of volume or whatever, or it's prone to a lot of outages or long outages, and you really want to just go to flash in the middle of the night. So let's say you set a time of day time span, so say 10 p.m. to 5 or 6 a.m. And if it happens to go to backup, you have an outage during that time span, instead of going to full automatic, you go straight to flash. And then when that window expires, if it's still in backup, then you've got your controller program to take it and start back up into full auto. So yeah, sky's the limit with your creativity, and we'll gladly help you with equations for the things that you want to do. So a lot of fun. So what do you do with that? So now you've got these equations. What can it do? So, well, what I did just to test it, I think this is a good idea to do when you write an equation, is to program it as a dashboard value. That way I can keep track of it. I say, oh yeah, is this condition true or is it false? As I'm playing with it, right? It's a good thing to do in your shop. Test it before you take it out to the street. Make sure it works the way you think it should, right? Then you would, probably get rid of that, because after you've tested it, that's fine. But you're more than likely going to want to drive a dry contact relay if it's going to control flash or something else. So you can drive a relay. You can trigger a data log with an equation. You can trigger timers and counters, all kinds of things with the output from custom data. Dry contact relays, they haven't changed too much physically. We now have the, still have the 6, 5 are programmable for you. C2 and C3 have changed a little bit from the FXM. FXM series was just low battery, and that meant if you had an extended outage and you happen to be a low battery situation and utility came back, it is possible that that relay would stay engaged longer than, even though you've got power back, because it's working off a hysteresis voltage, and voltage has to get to a certain point before that relay would disengage. And so that's why I always encourage our users to program it on the FXM for low battery plus no line, because as soon as line comes back, relay disengages because the logic statement's been broken. That's now the default in FXM-HP. C2 and C3 are already pre-programmed for low bat and no line. So that's probably the biggest change as far as thinking operationally what it will do, but also the power now, right? Because each of those relays can be configured for multiple triggers. Big difference from the FXM. FXM series, you had a drop-down list. You could pick one item, and that would be the only thing that you could have drive that relay. And then if you wanted anything fancy, any other logic, you would have to do hardwire logic by using a couple of relays to get the scenario that you wanted. Now you can pick as many triggers as you want to drive a relay. You can write equations to monitor all types of things to drive a relay. So a lot more power in that as well. And I'll be doing a webinar just on dry contact relays that's coming up. Speaking of that, we've got the education series. So this is the first one, the comparison between the FXM and the FXM-HP to show you the differences and how this product has greatly evolved. The next one coming up is the quick configuration guide, which is actually tomorrow. And so that one will be 12:30 Central Time. So it'll last about an hour. And I'll be going over the things that you're likely to want to configure and then show you live on a few of them and others on screenshots as to how to do this, how to get in there as well. Other ones we have coming up then are the logging. So I'll be talking about the different logs that we just went over, but I'm going to show you how to actually set up the data logs and ways to do those kind of things. Another one then will be custom data, where I'll talk about how do you write an equation, what are the parts of the equation, how do you monitor these things. Then we'll actually write 3 different equations and we'll make them run. So, and then the last one will be dry contact relays, where I'll go over how to change them. So they're not hard, they're just different. It's a different setup than just a drop down and check. Since you have so much power now in the programmability, there is just a little bit more that you need to consider as you set your relays and then how do you do it. So it's a little bit different setup than just a checkbox. So anyway, all right, there we go. So that's the FXM and FXM-HP comparison. So it's now question time.